Yes, 5 seconds. Comrades, the outgoing year will go down in history as a year of a definite change in the tension which has characterized the international situation in recent times. No little credit for this must be put down to the efforts of the Soviet Union to guarantee peace and security of nations, to strengthen confidence, and to promote cultural intercourse between countries, regardless of their social and political systems. A big contribution to the promotion of peace was undoubtedly the development of friendship and cooperation between the Soviet Union and India. This visit was a graphic manifestation of the peaceful foreign policy of the Soviet Union and a fitting conclusion reached in important international events. The immediate result of our visit to India was to strengthen and broaden the relations of friendship between the two countries and to bring the Soviet people into closer contact with the people of India. But its importance is not confined to this. The visit acquired tremendous international significance primarily because it reaffirmed the correctness of the basic principles of Soviet foreign policy. It demonstrated clearly and convincingly that this principle is a reliable basis for strengthening world peace and security and for promoting confidence among states. We know that the ASEAN countries, whose inhabitants constitute more than half the population on the globe, are becoming an increasingly important factor in the international affairs of our time. For centuries, the people of many Asian countries had been, and some of them still are, victims of harsh colonial oppression. Seeking to justify their policy and their domination over the Asian peoples, the colonialists sought and still seek to portray them as backward peoples culturally and socially. But it should not be forgotten that historically the development of the Asian peoples began long before the people of Europe entered the arena of history. In recent centuries, social and political development in Asia was retarded and lagged behind. This was the fault not of the Asian people but of the colonialists who established a system of administration based on violence, robbery, and inhuman exploitation of the people. This system is a source of fabulous wealth for the colonialists, but for the oppressed peoples of Asia and Africa, it spells poverty and dire suffering. This situation prevailed for a long time, but it could not last forever. To all who had the slightest acquaintance with the laws of social development, it was clear that a national liberation movement was bound to develop in the ASEAN countries and would acquire ever greater dimensions. The Asian people began to awaken and strengthen their backs. This great awakening was stimulated by the great October Revolution in our country and by the weakening of the colonial powers as a result of the two world wars. Speaking to the countries of East, our great teacher Lenin said that the masses of these countries would inevitably rise to put an end to their unequal position and become independent builders of a new life. A time would come when Asia's millions would become an active factor in world history and take part in shaping the destiny of mankind. Today we see that the colonial system is crumbling in Asia and throughout the East. The great Chinese people are stepping out along the broad highway of national regeneration and independence, building a socialist society of their country. The historic victory of the Chinese people has tremendously influenced the whole situation in Asia and the East generally. It has given a new impetus to the national liberation movement of the colonial and dependent peoples. The colonial yoke has been thrown off by the people of the great land of India, inspired by the urge to revive and regenerate their countries. These people have now entered the period of independent economic and political development. Having thrown off the colonial yoke and regained their independence, the Indian people, guided by their government, proceeded to the economic development of their country. The first achievement have been registered in this direction. In our conversation with Prime Minister Mr. Nehru and other Indian statesmen, we exchanged views both on questions relating to the further extension of friendly cooperation between the two countries on major international problems. These talks resulted in the joint Soviet-Indo Declaration. In the historic document, the two governments reaffirmed their adherence to the principles of respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-aggression and non-interference in each other's international affairs. The Soviet government considers that the adoption of these principles by other countries would contribute to further relaxation of international tension and the establishment of the necessary confidence among the nations. The Soviet and Indian governments condemned the present arms drive, which is assuming increasingly dangerous dimensions, and unanimously called for its termination and for relieving the nations of the heavy burden of military expenditure. Fully cognizant of the danger of a situation in which atomic and hydrogen weapons are being systematically and continuously accumulated, the two governments pronounced in favor of unconditional prohibition of these weapons, of freeing mankind from the fear of atomic war and the incalculable destruction of property and life it would involve. The Soviet Union has always advocated the termination of the arms drive and the conclusion of an international agreement prohibiting atomic and hydrogen weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. It includes guided missiles, which have become intercontinental weapons. Implementation of the Soviet Union proposal on reduction of conventional armaments and prohibition of atomic weapons would be a substantial contribution to the cause of peace. We are glad that in this noble cause the Indian government takes a stand which is similar to ours. The strengthening of political and economic relations between the Soviet Union and India can be supplemented by the development of cultural intercourse. We had the opportunity to convince ourselves of the tremendous creative ability of the Indian people. They have produced world famed memorials of material and spiritual culture, inimitable specimens of natural architecture, and a distinctive and remarkable school scenic art, dancing, and music, which preserves and carries forward the traditions of folk art. A strong desire for close cultural contact with the Soviet Union is to be observed in India. We welcome this desire, being convinced that such contact will be useful to both the peoples.